Even though the Wisconsin primary is tonight, Hillary Clinton is campaigning here in Brooklyn. She's holding a town hall event focusing on women's issues. She'll talk about everything from equal pay to equal access to health care. We just had a panel with a bunch of New York City officials, led by Tish James. Nicole Bell was also there, who just recently endorsed Ms. Clinton. She'll be here holding a town hall event, which is something she likes to do. The crowd's a little bit more intimate. She can interact with voters. She takes questions. She'll obviously be taking questions more on women's issues for this event, but also on issues that are related to the New York primary. There'll be some issues regarding criminal justice reform. There'll be some issues talking about what they just spoke about with Ms. James and her efforts on criminal justice reform. What this kind of means for the Clinton campaign is, Wisconsin's voting tonight. So Senator Sanders is just inched up in the polls. It's going to be very tight, but she's deciding to campaign in New York, her home state, where she was a senator for 8 years. It's an important moment for Ms. Clinton to be able to both fundraise and hold events here, because a loss in New York would be very humiliating for a senator from New York. So feel free to ask us any questions. We'll be here on the ground. Secretary Clinton should be coming on in about 10 minutes. And ask away. My producer here will be feeding me any kind of questions you might have. Rainey coming in? Yes, if there are any questions coming in. Well, either way, another thing that's interesting about this event, and who just spoke, is that Nicole Bell, who's the fiance of Sean Bell, the man who was killed in 2006, just endorsed Secretary Clinton. And that's very important in New York City, as both Secretary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders are competing over the crucial African-American vote down in New York City, as Ms. Clinton holds a pretty strong foundation in upstate voters. This morning, Senator Sanders actually just came out with an ad featuring Erica Garner. She endorsed him. They had released about a 2-minute ad in the South Carolina primary featuring Ms. Garner's endorsement. Now the 30-second ad that just aired in New York will be the first of either candidate to really kind of take on that message in New York. Ms. Clinton will also be introduced today by Congressman Yvette Clarke and First Lady of New York City, Chirlane McCray. They'll be giving their remarks, focusing on both women's issues and civil rights issues, as Mrs. Clinton, before she takes the stage. So normally what happens at a Clinton event is they'll have this same playlist. As the crowd kind of gets amped up, the playlist range from Katy Perry to, I don't even know who this band is right now. But it'll warm the crowd up, and then the speakers will come on, and then Secretary Clinton will come out. She'll give brief remarks to start, and then she'll start to take questions. Normally the questions come from voters who know what the event's about, so we'll talk about certain issues. Women's issues, will obviously be the main topic here, but voters can really ask whatever they want, and it gives a little bit more of a personal feel to the event than a similar stump speech. Especially in a state and a city where the secretary is known so well, you'll end up, seeing voters that she recognizes. So they'll want to ask her a little bit more personal questions, or questions that they're more familiar with her positions. So that's probably what we can expect to see today. The secretary will speak in the middle. It's not like a typical event where she's on a stage where there's a barrier and there's Secret Service on every side. She'll be surrounded by voters, surrounded by supporters, which kind of really exaggerates that personal feel and that intimate feel that she's hoping to get with this event in downtown Brooklyn. So again, we're here live at the Hillary Clinton event in Brooklyn on the day of the Wisconsin primary, and we're here to answer any questions you might have about Secretary Clinton or the campaign.
So why is she here and not in Wisconsin today?
It's a great question. So the reason that Secretary Clinton chose to come to New York today is that Senator Sanders has been blanketing Wisconsin, holding rallies every day, putting up ads, and the secretary has been there a lot. She's been to Madison, she's been to La Crosse, and she's put a lot of time in on the ground. But New York has a lot more delegates than Wisconsin, and B, is her home state. It's very important for her to do exceptionally well here, and while she has a 12-point roughly lead in the polls, Senator Sanders has been gaining momentum here. He is from Brooklyn, even though he's a senator from Vermont. He was born in Brooklyn. So the secretary is aware of the importance of New York, its delegate count, and also, while she's here, she has a pretty big network. And, with the fundraising race, Senator Sanders just raised $44 million in March. Secretary Clinton, $29 million. So New York is where she has a big fundraising base. She's able to hold fundraising events and meet with donors while also having campaign events. It's really her home base, and so she's able to build on her advantage here, her footprint here, and connect with people who she's known for a while. She's still very competitive in Wisconsin. There's no real telling which way it will go. I believe the last poll that came out today showed Senator Sanders up 2.6 points, which is within the margin of error. So she's certainly very competitive in Wisconsin, but she recognizes the importance of New York, the delegate importance of New York, and the fundraising advantage she can tap into here. And so again, we're here live at the Hillary Clinton event in Brooklyn, in downtown. She's holding a town hall event focusing mostly on women's issues. It's something that's been very important to her campaign. She focuses a lot on equal pay, on equal access to health care, and other issues that are important to women and women in the country. And we're here answering your questions about what you think about the event, what you think about the campaign, and what you think about Secretary Clinton.
Is it still possible for anyone other than her to win the nomination?
It is certainly still possible for anyone other than Secretary Clinton to win the nomination on the Democratic side, but she has a pretty significant delegate lead, including the superdelegates, when it comes to how the Democratic primary is pulling out. Now, no one is mathematically eliminated whatsoever. Senator Sanders still could win a large majority of the delegates, if possible, and earn a way into the convention. But Secretary Clinton, through her delegate advantage with the superdelegates, is pretty far ahead in the Democratic primary process. Now, it's not like the Republican side where if you don't get to a certain number, there'll be a contested, or it's not the same situation, I should say, as on the Republican side, where if Donald Trump doesn't reach that 1237 mark, anyone can contest him. On the Democratic side, we have the superdelegates who have all kind of mostly aligned with Secretary Clinton so far. Next question.
What would Hillary do for equal pay for women?
It's something that she's been advocating for a while. She has a long platform. She brings it out on her website. She's established some kind of platform where she'll make different federal mandates and different federal regulations that companies will have to disclose how they're paying. You can find a lot more on her website and on her different advertisements in terms of how she will enforce equal pay for women. But one of the main things that she's focused on now as a candidate is also simply raising awareness about the issue. It's something she's been passionate about for well over 2 decades. She's been, there's an advertisement that kind of strung together different statements that Hillary Clinton has made since the early 90s, and they've all had to do with her dedication to women's rights and her dedication to issues like equal pay. And so the more that she's talking about it on the trail, the more that she's raising awareness about it now and bringing it to the forefront of this campaign.
Why are minorities voting more for Clinton than for Sanders, if there is an
It's difficult to say that to put an exact reason as to why certain groups, whether they be minority groups or issue groups, are supporting Secretary Clinton or Senator Sanders. Now, Secretary Clinton has a longer presence in the national political spotlight. She, ran for president in 2008, and she's been very active in national politics. So through both her husband, President Clinton's campaigns, and then her campaign, she's kind of created a strong relationship with a lot of different minority groups, and she's been fighting for a lot of different minority groups for a long time. Now, Senator Sanders has as well. His new ad that came out today brought back scenes from the 1963 Chicago civil rights protests where Senator Sanders was arrested. But it really shows that Secretary Clinton has been in the national political spotlight more and fighting for these issues more. So she's more well known to certain groups than Senator Sanders would be.
Can you talk about how her view on women would affect women around the world?
That's a great question because it's something that's been very central to Hillary Clinton's worldview and political worldview for almost her entire career. In the mid-90s, she gave a speech that is now kind of the cornerstone of her stump speech and her campaign, is that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. So Hillary has considered, Secretary Clinton, has considered women's rights to be essential to human rights around the world. So as she establishes her foreign policy, as she goes around the world as president, she's going to be constantly considering how women are being treated in different countries, the same way that she would looking at human rights violations in terms of foreign policy, in terms of U.S. involvement in certain countries. So she has always had women's rights and human rights in the same mind frame since the famous speech she gave in the 90s. And again, we're here at Hillary Clinton's town hall event live in Brooklyn, New York. She's focusing mostly on women's issues today. She's going to be with First Lady of New York, Chirlane McCray. She'll be with Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. They'll both do introductions, and then Hillary will be hosting a town hall meeting. She'll be taking questions from voters and supporters here on women's rights or whatever else they feel like asking the candidate. And we're here also taking your questions live on Facebook Live with the New York Times. And Secretary Clinton should be coming on any moment. The event is supposed to start at 3:45. Normally they'll let these go for a little bit longer. They'll build up a little bit of excitement. Right now they're piping in different speeches that Secretary Clinton has done, either interviews or speeches about family life, about women's issues, and the entire crowd's listening. So we're going to cut away. We'll maybe let this go for a little bit longer. Secretary Clinton should be on momentarily. Thanks for joining us here on Facebook Live.
And that our kids can grow up understanding that not only are all things